The last true sound my father made was a wet, rattling sigh that seemed to deflate him forever into the hospital bed sheets. It was a sound that didn't belong to him. It was the sound of the cancer itself, a final, vulgar pronouncement from the thing that had been eating my mother from the inside for 18 months. I held one of her hands, its skin like paper stretched over a delicate bird-like structure of bone. My father held the other, his own large, work-roughened hand enveloping it, his head bowed so low his forehead touched their joined grip. He was whispering, a private, desperate litany of love and loss that I couldn't quite make out and didn't have the right to hear. That was Robert and Margaret, a closed circuit, a 42-year conversation that I, their only child, had always been a blessed witness to, but never a true part of. They were the foundation upon which my entire world was built. Their love was a physical law, as constant and reliable as gravity. If that could falter, then anything could. After she was gone, the silence in our old family home didn't just settle, it congealed. It became a thick, syrupy substance that filled the rooms, making the air hard to breathe. My father, once a man of quiet strength and dry wit, became a ghost haunting the spaces she had vacated. He was a silhouette cut out of the world. I'd find him standing in the middle of the kitchen, not looking for anything, just standing, as if he'd forgotten how to be a person and was waiting for her to come and remind him. I was 32 then. I lived 40 minutes away, had a life, a career, a partner that would later fizzle out under the strain of my grief. But my focus narrowed to a single, desperate point: my dad. I called him every day. The conversations were brief, brutal in their simplicity. "You eatin', Dad?" "Yes." "You sleepin'?" "Enough." "I can come by this weekend, mow the lawn?" "Don't fuss, son. I'm fine." He wasn't fine. He was a cathedral whose central pillar had been removed, holding its shape through sheer, crumbling inertia. I visited every Saturday, without fail. I'd stock his refrigerator with meals he wouldn't eat, clean a house that was already spotless with a kind of sterile neglect, and we'd sit in the living room, the television murmuring nonsense, and watch the clock tick towards the moment I could leave without feeling like a complete failure of a son. The house was a museum to my mother. Her gardening hat still hung on the peg by the back door. The faint, floral scent of her perfume still clung to the curtains in the master bedroom. Her favorite mug, the one with the chipped handle that said "World's Best Mom" in my clumsy childhood handwriting, sat on the counter, a sacred relic. My father moved through this museum with the reverence of its sole curator, careful not to disturb a single exhibit. And then, one Tuesday evening, during our obligatory phone call, his voice was different. It wasn't vibrant, not by a long shot, but the dead, hollow tone was punctuated by something, a flicker. I went to that group, the one the hospice nurse suggested," he said. "The grief support group?" I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. I'd been begging him to go for months. "Mm-hmm. It was, all right. Met a woman there. Linda." The world, which had been tilted on its axis since my mother's death, gave a sudden, violent lurch. A woman. "Oh?" I said, my voice dangerously neutral. "She lost her husband, Frank, pancreatic. We just talked. It was nice to talk to someone who gets it." "Gets it?" I wanted to scream. "No one gets it. No one gets what you two had." But I swallowed the acid rising in my throat. This was progress. This was a human connection. I was supposed to be happy. "That's great, Dad. Really. I'm glad." "She's just a friend," he said. And I heard the defensiveness creeping in, a tone I would become intimately familiar with. "It's not like that." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? The idea of my father with anyone other than my mother was not just improbable, it was a cosmological impossibility. It was like suggesting the sun might decide to rise in the west tomorrow. It violated the fundamental order of things. The erosion of that fundamental order began not with a quake, but with a slow, insidious drip. It was my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, who delivered the first real shock. A text message, 4 months after my father had first mentioned Linda. A photo. It was a grainy, long-distance shot, taken through the window of a restaurant I recognized, my father's favorite steakhouse. He was sitting across from a woman with soft, gray-streaked brown hair. She was smiling. He was smiling back. Not the ghost smile he'd given me for the past year, but a real one. It didn't reach his eyes, not quite, but it was there on his lips, a crack in the facade. The caption read, "Saw your dad out with a friend. Any news?" My thumb hovered over the screen. "Just a friend," I typed back, the words tasting like ash. The next drip came a month later. A Sunday visit. I let myself in with my key, the familiar click of the lock, a sound from a childhood that suddenly felt 1,000 years past. The smell hit me first. For my entire life, this house had smelled of lemon polish, old books, and my mother's gardenias, which she grew in pots on the sun porch. Now it smelled of synthetic lavender air freshener and something else, something vaguely chemical, like fresh paint. I walked into the living room and stopped dead. The photographs were gone. The massive wall-mounted collage of our family, my parents' wedding, my graduations, vacations to the Grand Canyon, that trip to the beach where I got stung by a jellyfish, was gone. In its place was a single, large, abstract painting, all muted swirls of gray and beige. Her favorite armchair, the one with the floral pattern worn thin in the seat from decades of her weight, was missing. A new, sleek leather chair sat in its place, angled aggressively towards the television. "Alex? That you?" my father's voice called from the kitchen. I couldn't move. My eyes scanned the room, taking inventory of the desecration. The shelves had been rearranged. Mom's collection of porcelain birds was absent. Her small writing desk in the corner was cleared of her stationery and pens. He came into the living room, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He looked healthier. He'd put on a little weight. His color was back. He was wearing a new shirt, a crisp blue button-down. "You're early." I said, my voice a dry croak. "The photos. Where are Mom's photos?" He blinked, as if the question was absurd. "Oh, that. The wall was looking a bit cluttered. Linda helped me redecorate. Doesn't it feel more open? More adult? Open?" It felt eviscerated. It felt like a stage after the play has ended and the sets have been struck. "Where are they?" I repeated, each word a shard of glass. "In boxes, in the basement, Alex. Don't make a fuss. They were just gathering dust." Just gathering dust. I looked at him, this man who had wept over the loss of her, and I saw a stranger. The grief I understood. This renovation of his grief, I did not.
That's when she appeared from the kitchen. Linda. She was shorter than I'd imagined, with a kind, slightly nervous face. She was holding a wooden spoon, and she was wearing my mother's apron, the old blue-checked one, with the loose string on the left strap. "You must be Alex," she said, her voice a soft, placating murmur. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you. Your father talks about you all the time." I couldn't speak. My eyes were locked on that apron. It was just an apron, a utilitarian thing, but seeing it wrapped around her body, a body that was not my mother's, felt like a violation. It was a ghost being dressed in the wrong skin. "Linda's been a godsend," my father said, his voice warm, almost buoyant. He put an arm around her shoulders. "She's got a real eye for this stuff, and her cooking. You'll stay for lunch, won't you? She's made her famous lasagna." I felt a cold nausea rise in my gut. My mother's lasagna, rich and meaty, with a secret blend of 3 cheeses, had been a family legend. It was the meal she made for birthdays, for comfort, for celebration. This was an invasion, not just of space, but of memory itself. I can't," I managed to say. "I forgot I have a thing." The disappointment on my father's face was sharp, but it was quickly masked by a bland acceptance. Linda's smile remained, but it looked strained at the edges. "Another time, then. We'd love to have you." I fled. I drove for an hour, my hands clenched on the steering wheel, my vision blurred by a hot, confused fury. He was erasing her. Systematically, deliberately, he was sanding down every rough edge of her existence in this world, painting over her memory with a bland, beige wash of contentment. He wasn't moving on. He was covering her up. The next few months were a series of small psychic murders. Each visit was a fresh wound. The garden was the hardest. My mother had cultivated that half-acre of land for 20 years. It wasn't just a garden, it was a testament to her patience, her love for color and life. Roses, peonies, lavender, a small, struggling vegetable patch. She knew every plant by name, talked to them, nurtured them like children. I pulled into the driveway one Saturday to find it gone, utterly annihilated. The earth was torn up, the plants ripped out and piled by the curb for disposal. 2 men were laying down a bed of gray gravel, upon which sat a sterile-looking set of modern patio furniture and a gas-powered fire pit. My father was standing on the new patio, a satisfied smile on his face. "What do you think? No more weeding, no more watering. It's a whole new outdoor living space." I stood on the ravaged earth. the scent of torn-up roots and damp soil filling my nose, the smell of a fresh grave. "Mom's garden," I whispered. "It was a lot of work, Alex, and it reminded me of her too much." He said it with a finality that brooked no argument. "Linda and I can actually enjoy the backyard now."
Every change was a nail in a coffin I hadn't been ready to close. He repainted the hallway from her favorite warm cream to a cold, modern gray. He moved his clothes out of the closet they had shared for 4 decades, donating her things to charity and consolidating his into the smaller spare room closet. Linda's clothes now hung where my mother's dresses had been. He even replaced the coffee maker, getting one of those complicated pod machines, abandoning the old, stained drip machine, whose gurgle and hiss had been the soundtrack to every morning of my life. Through it all, Linda was there, always kind, always gentle, a constant, placid presence that felt like an accusation. Her kindness was a weapon. How could I rage against someone who was so desperately trying to be nice, who cooked me meals I couldn't eat, who asked me polite questions about my work, who walked through this house of ghosts with the careful, apologetic steps of a new tenant who knows the previous owner died in the rooms? I tried to talk to my father once. "Dad, it feels like Mom is being disappeared." We were in the garage, a place that had so far escaped the renovation. He was looking for a specific wrench. He stopped, his back to me, his shoulders tensed. "Don't, Alex." "Don't what? Don't miss my mother? Don't notice that you've thrown out every piece of her?"
He'd turned around, and his face was a mask of a pain so raw it silenced me. "You think this is easy for me? You think I don't see her in every corner of this damned house? I can't live in a shrine, son. I can't. It's killing me. Linda gives me a reason to get up in the morning. She makes the pain quieter." "So you just replace it? Replace her?" "It's not replacement," he snapped, his voice cracking. "It's survival. You have your own life. You don't live here. You don't have to walk past her empty chair every night. You don't have to sleep in that empty bed." He took a shaky breath. "I thought you'd be glad I found some joy again." Joy. The word was a punch to the gut. Was that what this was? This bland, frictionless existence? This carefully curated, memory-free zone? It wasn't joy. It was anesthesia. I left that day feeling more orphaned than I had at my mother's funeral. He had chosen his path. He was building a lifeboat out of the wreckage of our past, and he was only building it for one. The breaking point, the moment the last thread of my understanding snapped, came on a bright, unforgivingly sunny afternoon in early autumn. I'd come by to drop off some mail that had been delivered to my address by mistake. I didn't bother knocking anymore. The sound felt like an admission that this was no longer my home. I found them on the new gravel and concrete patio. They were sitting side by side on the love seat, a large, leather-bound book open across their laps. I knew that book. It was my mother's photo album, the one she had meticulously curated for their 40th anniversary, the Life So Far album.
And my father was laughing. Not a polite chuckle, a real, deep, from-the-belly laugh. He was pointing at a picture, his finger stabbing the page. Linda was leaning into him, her head on his shoulder, smiling. "And the kid was covered in it," my father was saying, his voice rich with amusement. "Head to toe. Margaret was so mad, but she couldn't stop laughing long enough to scold him." He was talking about me. About the time at the county fair when I was 8, when I tried to eat an entire giant swirl of cotton candy in one go, and it had ended up a sticky pink catastrophe all over my clothes and face. It was a story my mother loved to tell. A story that, in the year after her death, would make my father's eyes well up with a grief so profound it was a physical presence in the room. Now, he was laughing. He looked up and saw me standing in the doorway. His laughter didn't cut off abruptly. It faded, naturally, into a warm, welcoming smile. "Alex! I didn't know you were stopping by. Come look at this. I was just showing Linda the fair incident." I walked towards them, my legs moving on autopilot. My heart was a cold, hard stone in my chest. I looked down at the album. There was the picture. Me, a pink mess, my face a mask of sugary despair. My mother was in the background, her hand over her mouth, her shoulders shaking with laughter. The memory was a happy one. It should have been a happy one.
But seeing him laugh at it, with her, felt like a betrayal deeper than any affair. He wasn't just erasing my mother's presence, he was rewriting their shared history, sanding down the painful, sharp edges of his grief until the memories were smooth, pleasant anecdotes he could share with his new wife. The ugly thing that twisted inside me wasn't jealousy. It wasn't even grief, not in its pure form. It was the horrifying, isolating realization that he had found a way to cauterize his wound. He had found a human bandage in Linda. He could replace the source of his pain. But I couldn't replace my mother. My pain was permanent. My memories were all I had left, and he was in the process of making them feel like they belonged to someone else. He could move on. I was stuck in the quicksand of my loss, and he was just watching from the solid, comfortable bank holding Linda's hand. "I can't do this," I said, my voice quiet, flat. His smile faltered. "Do what, son?" "This," I gestured at the album, at the patio, at Linda, at him. I need some space." The confusion on his face was genuine, which made it all the more enraging. "Space? Alex, what are you talking about? I thought you were coming around." "Coming around to what?" The bitterness finally broke through, sharp and corrosive. "To you turning our family home into a showroom? To you laughing at Mom's memories like they're old sitcom reruns?" His face hardened. "That's not fair." "No," I agreed. The coldness returned. "Don't call me."
I turned and walked away. I heard him call my name once, but I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I walked away from my father, and I felt nothing but a vast, desolate emptiness. The foundation had not just cracked, it had vaporized. I was falling, and there was no one left to catch me. The silence that followed was of a different quality than the one after my mother's death. That had been a shared silence, a mutual, respectful hush in the face of a great loss. This was a wall. I built it brick by brick with my anger and my grief, and he, from his side, made no attempt to scale it. 4 months passed.
The seasons changed outside my apartment window, but inside, everything was stuck on that bright autumn afternoon on the patio. I went to work, I saw friends, I functioned. But a part of me was perpetually standing in that doorway, watching my father laugh, feeling the cold stone of betrayal in my chest. My anger began to curdle into something colder, more analytical. The initial raw pain had been about the erasure of my mother, but now, in the quiet of my self-imposed exile, a new, more disturbing question began to form. Why? Why the frantic, wholesale renovation? Why the need to not just move on, but to obliterate all traces of the past? Grief makes people do strange things, I knew, but this felt less like grief and more like panic. A frantic, almost violent effort to cover something up.
It was a Tuesday night, rain lashing against my windows, when my phone lit up with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something, some faint tug of intuition, made me swipe to accept. Alex? It was a woman's voice, soft, hesitant. I knew it immediately. Linda. A fresh wave of anger, hot and immediate, washed over me. How dare she? How dare she breach the wall? What do you want? My voice was rougher than I intended. She was silent for a moment, and I could hear her breathing, could almost feel her gathering her courage. I know you don't want to hear from me, and I respect that. I do. But I'm worried about your father. I almost laughed. He has you. He's fine. He's not, she said, and the genuine distress in her voice gave me pause. He's not sleeping. He paces at night. He sits in the living room in the dark for hours. He won't talk to me about it. He just says everything is fine. But it's not. It's like it was before, only worse somehow. A grim satisfaction bloomed in my chest. Good. Let him feel it. Let him sit in the hollow beige house he built and feel the ghost he tried so hard to exorcise. That sounds like a you problem, I said, the words cruel and satisfying on my tongue. There was another long pause. I heard her sigh, a sound of profound weariness. Alex, I am not your enemy. I'm not trying to be her. I know I never could be. When I met your father, he was a shell. He was so lost. All I wanted was to give him a little comfort, a little companionship. You got a marriage out of it pretty quick, I shot back. It was fast, she admitted, no defensiveness in her tone. Just a simple, stark fact. For both of us. Grief, it does strange things to time. It makes you desperate for an anchor. But I need you to understand something. I care about him, deeply. And I see what this rift with you is doing to him. It's destroying him all over again.
I said nothing. The rain hammered against the glass. He loves you so much, Alex. You're all he has left of everything. She took a sharp breath. I'm not asking you to accept me. I'm not asking you to call me mom or anything ridiculous. I'm just asking you to see him, to talk to him. As someone who cares about him, I'm begging you. Please, just come to dinner. No expectations, no pressure, just come. Her words were seeping through the cracks in my armor. They weren't the words of a manipulative homewrecker.
They were the words of someone who was, herself, standing in the blast radius of my father's unresolved pain. She sounded tired. She sounded scared. She sounded real. The narrative I'd constructed of the cunning new wife systematically replacing the old began to fissure. What if she was just a lonely widow who'd found another lonely widow? What if my father was the architect of all this? What if Linda was just living in the house he had redesigned, playing the part he had assigned to her? The thought was a seismic shift. The enemy wasn't in the house. The enemy was the house, and its architect was my father. "When?" I asked, the word torn from me.
I could hear the relief in her voice, so palpable it was almost a physical thing. "Friday? 7 o'clock? I'll make a roast." "Don't make a roast," I said, a reflexive command. A roast was a Sunday meal, a family meal, my mother's domain. "Okay," she said softly. "No roast, something simple." Walking into that house on Friday night was like walking into a dream, a familiar setting populated by unsettling doppelgangers. The smell of lavender air freshener was still there, but underneath it I detected the scent of garlic and herbs, real cooking. Linda greeted me at the door. She wasn't wearing the blue-checked apron. She was wearing a simple, modern, black one, a small but significant concession. "Alex," she said, her smile tentative. "Thank you for coming." My father stood behind her, his hands shoved into his pockets. He looked older than he had 4 months ago. The healthy color was gone, replaced by a gray pallor. The circles under his eyes were back. Linda hadn't been lying. "Son," he said, his voice gruff. "Dad." It was the most awkward exchange of my life. We moved to the living room, the scene of the crime. I sat in the new leather chair. It was uncomfortable, designed for aesthetics, not for sinking into. He sat on the sofa. Linda hovered for a moment before saying, "I'll just check on the pasta," and fleeing to the kitchen. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. "You look tired," I finally said. He ran a hand over his face. "Not sleeping great." "The bed too new?" I couldn't stop the barb. His eyes flicked to mine, sharp with a flash of the old hymn. "Don't start, Alex." "Why did you do it, Dad?" The question was out before I could stop it, stripped of its anger, leaving only the raw, bewildered pain beneath. "The photos, the garden, her chair. Why did you have to get rid of everything?" He looked away, towards the abstract painting that had replaced our family history. His jaw worked. "I told you, I couldn't live in a museum." "It wasn't a museum. It was our home. It was her home. And you sanitized it. You acted like she never existed." "That's not true," he snapped, his voice rising. But then he deflated, his shoulders slumping. He looked old. So old. "You don't understand. You weren't here. Every single thing in this house was a needle, a little jab. The smell of her perfume on that scarf in the closet. The way the light hit her chair in the afternoon. That damn garden, always in bloom, like she was just outside the window. It was 1,000 little cuts every day, Alex. I was bleeding out in here.
His words painted a picture of agony I had been too wrapped up in my own grief to see. But it didn't absolve him. It only confused the issue further. So you replaced it all. You replaced the pain. I was trying to survive, he said, his voice cracking. Linda, she was a fresh start, a clean slate. And what was Mom? A dirty slate? The question hung in the air between us, a grenade whose pin had been pulled. It was Linda who broke the tension, appearing in the doorway. "Dinner's ready," she said, her voice carefully neutral. She'd undoubtedly heard every word. Dinner was a quiet, strained affair. The food was good, simple, and inoffensive. The conversation was a minefield of polite, shallow topics. The weather, my job. It was exhausting. Linda tried to bridge the gaps, but my father and I were locked in a silent, brutal stalemate. After we finished, my father retreated to the living room, claiming he needed to watch the news. I helped Linda clear the plates, a silent offering of truce. We stood at the sink, the sound of running water filling the silence. "She keeps one photo, you know," she said softly, not looking at me. She was washing a plate with meticulous care.
What? Of your mother. On his nightstand. It's the only one left in the house. It's the one from their wedding day. I stared at her profile. This was a secret she was sharing with me. A piece of my father she had seen that I had not. Why are you telling me this? She shut off the water and turned to face me, her hands still wet. Her eyes were earnest, filled with a compassion that for the first time didn't feel condescending. Because I think you need to know that he hasn't erased her. Not really. He's built a fortress around the part of him that still holds her. All of this, she gestured around the renovated kitchen, the new paint, the new furniture, the patio, it's the wall. The photo on the nightstand is what he's protecting inside. It's too painful for him to have it out in the open. It's his, and it's private. The insight was so stunning, so psychologically astute, it left me breathless. I had seen the destruction. She had seen the architecture of the defense mechanism. He wanted her life, not her love, I murmured, the core realization of the last few months finally crystallizing into words. Linda's face softened with a profound sadness. Oh, Alex, I think it's the opposite. I think he wanted her love so desperately that her life, the physical reality of it without her in it, became unbearable. He didn't want a new life. He wanted the old one back. And when he couldn't have it, he tried to build a replica that didn't hurt so much.
In that moment, any remaining animosity I held towards Linda evaporated. She wasn't the beneficiary of my father's betrayal. She was a fellow prisoner in the fortress he had built. She saw the man more clearly than I did. She saw the wounded animal hiding behind the new walls. I left that night not with peace, but with a new, terrifying direction for my confusion. The target of my hurt had shifted from my father and Linda to my father alone. And Linda's words had given me a key. The fortress had a weak point. The photo on the nightstand. The idea came to me a week later, unwelcome and persistent. It was a compulsion, a need to know. If the house was the wall, then what was inside the fortress? What was so precious, so painful, that it had to be hidden away from the world, even from me? I needed to see that photo, not just see it, but understand the context. What was next to it? Was it face down? Was it covered in dust? Was it a gesture of love or a monument to guilt? I knew my father's routine. Every Thursday, he and Linda drove to the next town over for a late afternoon movie and an early dinner, a standing date. The house would be empty. The following Thursday, I called in sick to work. A coil of anxiety tightened in my stomach all day. This was a violation. I knew that. To go into his house uninvited and snoop in his bedroom felt like a profound transgression. But the need to know, to find some scrap of the truth he was withholding, was a stronger force. At 4:30 p.m., I parked my car a block away and watched their sedan pull out of the driveway and turn onto the main road. I waited 10 minutes, then walked to the house, the key I had never returned, feeling like a stolen object in my hand. The lock turned with a smooth, quiet click. I stepped inside. The silence of the empty house was different. It was watchful, accusing. I felt like an intruder, because I was one. I moved quickly through the living room, down the hall to the door of the master bedroom. I hesitated, my hand on the doorknob. This was the room where my mother had died. This was the room my father had shared with her for 42 years, and now shared with another woman. It was the epicenter of the entire painful mystery. I pushed the door open. The room had been transformed. The old, dark wood furniture was gone, replaced by a low platform bed and minimalist nightstands. The walls were the same cold gray as the hallway. The quilt my grandmother had made was gone, replaced by a plain white duvet. It was a hotel room, a very nice, very impersonal hotel room. My eyes went to the nightstand on my father's side, and there it was. A simple silver frame, and inside, the black and white photo from their wedding day. My mother, so young, so breathtakingly beautiful, her eyes sparkling with a joy that was almost painful to look at. My father, handsome and proud, his arm wrapped tightly around her waist, looking at her like she had hung the moon and all the stars. It was the photo, the one Linda had told me about.
But it wasn't facing out towards the room. It was angled inward, towards the pillow. It was positioned for him to look at when he was in bed, and only then. A private audience with a ghost. My breath caught in my throat. The love in that picture was so potent, so tangible. It made the sterile room around it feel like a cheap stage set. This was the heart of the fortress. This was the treasure he was protecting. I took a step closer. Next to the frame, there was a small, leather-bound book. Not a photo album. It looked like a journal. My mother's journal. My pulse hammered in my ears. This was beyond a violation. This was sacrilege. But my hand moved as if possessed. I picked up the journal. It felt warm, almost alive. I didn't open it, not at first. I just held it. This was her voice, her private thoughts, the last untouchable piece of her in this house. Why was it here? Why, after removing every other trace of her, had he kept this one, most intimate thing on his nightstand, next to their wedding photo? The coil of anxiety in my gut tightened into a knot of dread. Linda's compassionate theory suddenly felt naive. This didn't feel like protecting a cherished memory. This felt like evidence. A secret he couldn't bear to be far from, but couldn't bear to have anyone else see. With a trembling hand, I opened the journal. It wasn't full of her flowing script. The first few pages were, dated from a year before her diagnosis. Mundane, beautiful things. Robert fixed the leaky faucet today. He was so proud of himself. Alex called. He sounds happy. My boys. Then, about halfway through the book, the entries changed. The handwriting became shakier, the entries shorter. They were from during the illness. The pain is worse today. Robert didn't leave my side. He looks so tired. We talked about the will again. He hates it, but it has to be done. The garden is so beautiful this spring. I hope someone takes care of my roses. I flipped a few more pages, my heart aching, and then I saw it. An entry that was different from the others. It was dated just 2 weeks before she died. The writing was barely more than a scrawl, the hand of someone clinging to the very edge of life. Robert is acting strange. He's talking about reverse mortgages, about freeing up the equity in the house. He says it's for my medical bills, but the insurance has covered everything. He says it's for Alex's inheritance, to make sure it's liquid. It feels frantic. It doesn't feel like him. It feels like he's already living in a world after I'm gone, and he's scared. What is he so scared of? The words blurred on the page. Reverse mortgage. My father had never mentioned a reverse mortgage to me. Not once. He'd always been so proud that the house was paid off, that it was the one solid thing he and my mother had built together, the thing they would leave to me. I stood there in the cold, gray room, my mother's journal in my hand, and the final ugly piece of the puzzle clicked into place. It wasn't about grief. It wasn't about love. It was about money.
The frantic renovations, the erasure of her, the hasty marriage to a fellow widow from a support group, a woman who was kind, who was lonely, who wouldn't ask too many questions. It wasn't that he wanted her life. He wanted her asset, the house. He was trying to transform it, to sever its connection to her, to my childhood, to me, so he could monetize it without the weight of the past, without my interference. So he could cash in his chips and start over, unencumbered. The photo on the nightstand wasn't a cherished memory. It was a pillory, a life sentence of his own making. He had to look at it every night, a reminder of the woman he was betraying for the second time, first by erasing her, and now by trying to sell the home she loved out from under her son. The karma wasn't something I needed to engineer. It was already here. It was living with him, in this sterile room, sleeping next to him in this bed. It was the ghost in the silver frame, watching him every single night. I placed the journal back exactly as I had found it. I smoothed the duvet. I walked out of the room, out of the house, and back to my car. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel hurt. I felt a cold, clear, and terrifying calm. The war was over. I had just discovered that my father had been fighting for the wrong side all along, and he had already lost. I didn't confront him, not immediately. The power had shifted, and with it, my entire perspective. The betrayed, grieving son was gone. In his place was a strategist, coldly assessing the board. I started digging, quietly, methodically. I ran a background check on Linda. Clean. A retired librarian, her husband had left her a modest but comfortable life insurance policy. She wasn't a gold digger. She was a pawn, a lonely, kind-hearted pawn in my father's game.
I called my Aunt Carol under the guise of making amends for my distance. I casually brought up the house, how different it looked. "Oh, I know," she said, her voice laced with a disapproval she'd never voiced to me before. "It's a shame. All that beautiful garden. Your mother loved that house, but your father? He's been talking about unlocking its potential for years. Even before she got sick, he'd mentioned selling, moving to a condo in Florida. Margaret would hear none of it. She said that house was your inheritance. It was the family anchor." The family anchor. An anchor he was now trying to weigh himself down with or cut loose for cash. I did a public record search on the property. No reverse mortgage had been taken out. Not yet. But the seed had been planted in my mother's mind, and now in mine. He was waiting for something. For the renovations to be complete, for the memory of my mother to be sufficiently scrubbed from its walls so he could look a bank manager in the eye and call it just a house, for me to be sufficiently alienated so I wouldn't question it. My visits resumed, but they were different now. I was an observer, an anthropologist studying a fascinating, doomed tribe. I went every other Sunday. I accepted a cup of tea from Linda. I made polite conversation with my father. I watched them. And now, with my new knowledge, I saw the cracks in their performance with stunning clarity. I saw the way my father's smile would falter the second he thought no one was looking, his eyes drifting towards the hallway that led to the bedroom, to the photo and the journal. I saw the careful, almost desperate way he would agree with everything Linda said, a man trying to convince himself of his own script. I saw the tension in his shoulders when I complimented the new backsplash in the kitchen, as if I had seen the receipt. Linda, too, seemed different. Her kindness was less forced, more pitying. She watched my father with a concerned, maternal eye. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know what. She was living with a ghost, and the ghost was him. The karma was not a dramatic, fiery crash. It was a slow, internal combustion. It was the cancer of guilt eating him from the inside. He had wanted a life without pain, a clean, frictionless existence. Instead, he had built a prison of his own design, and he was the sole inmate. The warden was his own conscience, and the sentence was life. One Sunday, I arrived to find my father alone. "Linda's at a book club meeting," he said, looking strangely vulnerable without his buffer. We sat in the sterile living room. The silence was back, but this time I owned it. "The house looks good," I said, my tone neutral, conversational. "Must have cost a pretty penny. The new patio, the kitchen, you'd almost never know the old one was here." He flinched, a barely perceptible twitch near his eye. "It was an investment." "I'm sure. In lifestyle?" I took a sip of my coffee.
You know, a guy at work was telling me about his parents. They did a reverse mortgage. Freed up a lot of cash for them to travel. Is that the plan, Dad? You and Linda gonna see the world? The color drained from his face. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. He knew. He knew that I knew.
I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. Sure you do, I said, my voice still calm, almost gentle. Mom knew, too, at the end. She wrote about it in her journal. She was worried about you. She said you seemed scared. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping on a dock. The facade crumbled in an instant, leaving behind a raw, terrified old man. You went in my room? He whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fury and shame. I did, I admitted, no apology in my tone. I needed to understand. And I think I do now. This was never about grief. This was about panic, financial panic. You were afraid of being left with nothing, so you started planning to cash in the one thing that was truly theirs, hers and mine. But you couldn't do it with her ghost in every room, could you? So you tried to exorcise her. And when that didn't work, you tried to replace her with a stand-in to make the pill easier to swallow. Tears welled in his eyes, but they were not tears of remorse for my mother. They were tears of self-pity, of being caught. You don't understand what it's like to be my age, to see your savings, to have nothing but a house full of memories that are killing you. I understand that you tried to sell my mother's anchor, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet. I understand that you were so desperate to escape the life you built with her, that you were willing to betray her final wishes and disinherit your own son. And for what? A condo in Florida? A new start? With Linda? Do you even love her, Dad? Or is she just part of the new decor?
He buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook with silent, ragged sobs. It was not the catharsis I had imagined. It was pathetic. It was the unmasking of a small, frightened man who had made a series of catastrophic, cowardly decisions. I felt no triumph, no vengeance, just a vast, hollow sadness. "The journal," he mumbled into his hands. What did you—" I read the entry about the reverse mortgage. That's all I needed to read. The rest is between you and her. I stood up. I looked down at this broken king in his hollow beige castle. The poetic justice was complete. He had everything he thought he wanted. A new wife, a new house, a plan for a new life. And he was utterly, completely miserable. He was living his karma every single day. "The house is yours, Dad," I said. "Do what you want with it. But know this. You've already lost what was actually valuable, and no amount of equity can ever buy that back." I didn't see him for another 2 months. The invitation, when it came, was from Linda again. A simple text. "He's not well. He's asking for you." This time, when I entered the house, I didn't feel like an intruder or an observer. I felt like a visitor to a hospice. My father was in the living room, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm day. He looked shrunken.
The renovations around him seemed garish now, like cheap makeup on a corpse. Linda gave me a small, sad smile and retreated to the kitchen, giving us space. I sat down opposite him, and he looked at me, his eyes clear for the first time in years, stripped of pretense. "I'm sorry, Alex," he said. The words were simple and utterly inadequate, but they were real. I just nodded. I was terrified. He continued, his voice a dry rustle. After she was gone, it wasn't just the loneliness, it was the silence of my own life. I looked in the mirror and saw an old man with nothing to show for his years but a pile of memories that hurt. The house felt like a tomb. I thought if I could change it, I could change how I felt. I thought if I had someone new, I could be someone new. "And the money?" I asked, not with accusation, but with a clinical need for the final truth. He sighed, a long, shuddering breath. "It was a stupid idea. A salesman got a hold of me, talked about leveraging my assets, said I was sitting on a gold mine but living like a pauper. It sounded like a way out, a way to run away from it all. But you can't run away from yourself." He looked around the room, a flicker of disgust in his eyes. "I built this thing, and I hate it. I hate every beige wall, every piece of gravel out in that yard." He looked back at me, his eyes pleading. "I loved your mother more than my own life. That's why all of this, it hurt so much. It was a monument to my own failure, to my cowardice."
It was the truth I had been waiting to hear. Not that he loved her, but that he knew he had failed her. That was the karmic justice. He had to live with that knowledge, in the sterile monument he had built to his own weakness. "What will you do?" I asked. "I'm going to undo it," he said, a faint spark of the old determination in his eyes. "As much as I can. I'm going to put the photos back. I'm going to hire a landscaper to put in a new garden. For her." He glanced toward the kitchen. "I've talked to Linda. She understands. She's a good woman. I don't deserve her kindness." "No," I agreed softly. "You don't." But she was staying. The prisoner had chosen to remain in the fortress with her jailer, out of a compassion I would never fully understand. It's better now. Not perfect. Not easy. The wounds are too deep to ever fully heal. I visit twice a month. We don't talk about the journal, or the reverse mortgage, or the great erasure. We talk about the weather. We talk about my job. Sometimes we even talk about my mother, a safe, happy memory, carefully unearthed from the past. The house is slowly changing again. The abstract painting is gone, replaced by a few of the old photos. A new rosebush, a variety called Margaret's Memory, is struggling to take root in the backyard. The fortress walls are being dismantled, brick by brick. My father keeps the one photo of my mother on his nightstand. Now it faces out into the room, a public declaration, an admission. I don't flinch when I see Linda wearing that stupid blue checked apron anymore. I see her for what she is, a salvage crew, trying to help my father raise the anchor he tried so hard to cut loose. And sometimes when I watch them sitting together, not laughing,
not with that performative joy, but sitting in a quiet, weary companionship. I tried to remember that losing someone doesn't mean freezing time. It doesn't mean building walls or running away. It just means learning where your love belongs when the person who was its primary recipient is gone. My father's love belonged in a photo on a nightstand, and in the memory of the woman he failed. Mine belongs to the mother I lost, and to the complicated, broken man who is still my father. I'm still learning.